Hi, welcome back to the channel. So all it takes to be a really good sewer is time, experience and confidence. It can take a while to pick those things up. So in this video, I've got 8 things that I've done that have taken me from being a really bad beginner sewer to quite a good intermediate one quite quickly. Let's get into it. So the first thing I did was accept what the tape measure was saying. When I first started to sew, I'll never forget the first time I looked at the back of a pattern and saw that my measurements did not fit into the pattern. I thought, what is wrong with me? Why can't I fit into this pattern? I still can remember I was stood in work and I was looking at a pattern. Yes, probably shouldn't have been looking at patterns in work, but I was. I automatically went to, what is wrong with me? Maybe I can't sew garments if patterns don't come in my size. Maybe I just have to sew bags. But actually, I wanted to persevere because I wanted to make clothes. And so I did. I went on a journey of making clothes that didn't fit me in a size 10, in a size 12. I had no one to sew them for. I was sewing for the pure pleasure. Very, very quickly, that got old and I wanted to start doing my own patterns for my own body. So I had to start looking more deeply into my measurements, the adjustments I needed to make. And it was once I accepted the size that I was and worked with that rather than against it, that sewing became a lot easier, a lot quicker. So the next thing that took me from being a bad sewer to a good one was I became opinionated about sewing. Yes, if you've been following me for any length of time, then you know I am quite opinionated in what I think about sewing and things going on in the sewing niche. I've never held back from that. You can check these videos out. They'll be linked down below. But what being opinionated has done is helped me to make decisions about the journey that I want to go on. So maybe if I wasn't opinionated, I would just try anything and everything and I would get nowhere really, really quickly. I decided really quickly on it wasn't okay that patterns didn't come in my size. So I stopped buying patterns that didn't come in my size. I have quite strong opinions about what sort of clothes suit me. For example, you will never catch me in a maxi skirt. I did actually do a video with a maxi skirt. And I never ever wore the garment after the video. I just don't feel comfortable in anything that doesn't suit me according to my own opinions. And since I've come back to sewing, you know I have very specific opinions about sewing, about keeping a stash, about the amount of sewing we do. Other people do it differently to me and that's perfectly okay. We're all on our own journey. I would urge you to also become opinionated. Be certain in the decisions you're making. Make decisions that are best for your sewing journey and make decisions that are going to help increase your skills and get you good a lot quicker. If you're liking this content so far, do hit that subscribe button and give me a like down below. Help the algorithm, give the algorithm everything it needs. By the way, in case you're wondering what I'm wearing, this is a top that I made a few videos ago. You can find it on my channel and I'll link it down below. A few people have asked what pattern it is. It is a NYX dress by Closet Core, but you can find all the details in the video where I took you along the journey of making it. So I'm not sure what my hair's doing here, but the next one is to see the positives in our own sewing, even when all we see is mistakes. So I touched on this in previous videos, but when we sew, I certainly spoke about this when I made this top because there was little bits I was not happy with. But when we sew, we are very focused on every little bit of sewing that we are doing. So for example, if you're sewing in a neckband, you will be focusing very heavily on the sewing of that neckband. If you're adding a patch pocket, you will be focusing on that. Is it pattern matched, etc. So whatever you're sewing, you are micro focused on that little bit. And if it is not perfect, we beat ourselves up, don't we? We think it is the end of the world. We've purchased this fabric. It's the favourite fabric in our whole stash. We've done it wrong and the world has come to a complete and utter end. It hasn't, has it? because there's a few things that we can do with that. We can go back and we can redo it. We can unpick it, make sure that unpicker or that seam ripper is your friend. But another thing is, we can ask ourselves, is it worth going back? Maybe once we finish the garment, no one's going to even notice that tiny little thing. For example, I wasn't happy with my button loops on here, but can you see a problem? Only if you look really, really closely. So we have to ask ourselves, is it worth worrying about spending extra time and effort on those little tiny details that no one's going to notice, and actually focus on the fact that we're doing some good sewing, we're trying techniques that we haven't tried before. We're moving forward with every project we do, so why are we taking time to worry about tiny little mistakes? Do you think that when they make ready-to-wear clothes in the factory that mistakes don't happen? Yes, mistakes happen. They still put them on the production line, they still send them to the shops, and we still buy them. Next time you're in a clothing store, have a look closely at the pattern matching and the sewing itself. You will see lots and lots of mistakes, and no one in the general population who doesn't sew is not sitting there focusing on it. They don't even notice it. And my little opinionated rant over. What I will say is, by focusing on the good and not the bad, we're not going to hold ourselves back, because what we do when we are only focusing on the bad, and this doesn't only apply to sewing, this applies to life. When we only focus on that, we're holding ourselves back, because when we feel negative, we make decisions negatively. Think positively about your garment, so you'll finish it, you'll be really proud, and you'll be keen to start another project, which will move your skills even further. I am loving making this video for you today. I really wasn't sure that I wanted to get on camera, feeling a bit tired. Now I'm doing it. I absolutely love it. I feel that this information I'm sharing with you is really important, and it's going to help you level up your sewing. So let's get into the next point. So this one is that I stopped caring what other people were making. When I first started making clothes and I discovered Instagram, this was way before I had a YouTube channel, I would follow people and I would really care, for want of a better word, what other people were making. I was thinking they were making all these gorgeous garments. Why don't my garments ever come out as well as that? They do, because their garments don't come out as well as they look on the photographs. We can all take photographs that pose us in our best light, can't we? Or our worst light if we're asking our husbands to take pictures of us. But what that did, watching someone's highlight reel, made me feel inadequate in my sewing, and it made me want to give up. Back in the day, I would see people on Instagram making clothes, making them fit perfectly for their body, seemingly without any kind of alterations whatsoever. And here's me on day 6 of number 20's twirl, and I still haven't got the fit down. And there was one dress, the Rue dress by Colette, that nearly knocked me off my game completely, because I just could not get the fit right. And it was because I had those other people's pictures, their images, constantly going over in my mind. I'm sounding a little bit insane, aren't I? It's not like all day, every day I was thinking about this, but when I did get onto Instagram and look, I just talked to myself and I said, Claire, you've got to stop worrying what other people are making. Anyone that made me feel bad, I unfollowed them or unsubscribed to them, and I just started doing my own thing. You probably noticed that my channel is a little bit different to most of the other channels out there. In some ways it's the same, in many ways it's different, because I just do my own thing. I've got my own limitations, I've got my own interests, I've got my own opinions, and so that drives my decisions. So I would urge you, if you're just following all these people and you're feeling bad about it, unfollow them. Stop caring what other people will make. Spend less time looking at other people's makes on social media and spend more time on your sewing. That is the only way you're going to improve your sewing more quickly. So the next one is a biggie, and that is that I had to accept that sewing was not just sewing. So it's also tracing, It's also adapting. It's also doing twirls, also basting. It's also unpicking. There are so many things before we get to the actual sewing that it's just like, wow, I used to feel was standing in my way. I've got a moany cat again down here. I tend to film later in the afternoon. It's just before his dinner time. He's not happy. I feel that before I stopped posting on this channel, when I was burnt out, I feel like a part of that was to do with this, because I had recently got into the idea that I had to do lots of twirls, and I was doing 2, 3, 4 twirls, and I really didn't enjoy it. I just wanted to sew, and it became too much work for me. But when I came back to the channel, I accepted that that was part of the process of having a really well-fitting garment. Look how lovely the shoulder seam sits on my shoulder now, and that only happened after 4 twirls. We can either come into sewing, rush through all the process to get to the actual sewing, then whiz off a top in an hour or 2 and then not be happy with it. Or we can enjoy the journey. We can take on board every step of the process and enjoy it for what it is, and learn and develop our skills in that area. If we was working in the fashion industry, we would have one job, but we're home sewers, we have to do everything. And so it's all about taking your time with each step. Sometimes I will do cutting out one day, and I will be doing a twirl on a different day. You don't have to do it all in one sitting. And you could have a few different projects on the go, all at different stages. So whatever you're feeling like doing, you can do that. And it's not going to hold you back. The biggest thing with all these things I'm sharing is that if we don't do it, it's going to hold us back, and it's going to slow our progress. So the next thing I learned that really escalated, I'm thinking of an escalator now, I'm not sure what you call them in America, but it escalated. It took me up very easily to the next level, and that was understanding that mistakes are not fatal. Now, I did touch on this just now, but I really want to take a minute to talk about it because it is really, really important. When I was first sewing, I would make a mistake, and at best, I would ignore it, carry on, and have a really poor fitting garment. At worst, I would abandon the project altogether. So I remember when I made my first pair of trousers, it was some pyjama bottoms from the first Tilly and the Buttons book. I'd cut out the front and the back, and I could not work out for the life of me why the front and the back were different shapes, because I felt that they should be the same shape. Little clue there. Understand constructions before you make clothes. Rather than working out what the problem was, I just cut one of the sides to look like the other side. And then I carried on. I sewed them up, completely sewed them, tried them on, and they look really, really odd. I wish I had some imagery to show you, but they just did not work. So what I would do now, even if I made a pair of trousers and I made a really grave error, I would go back and look and try to understand the mistake I made so that I didn't make it the next time. Because back then, I didn't know what I did. I didn't care. And I moved forward making the same mistakes again. I don't think I ever cut out another pair of trousers like that. But I made similar mistakes where I just was making these clothes, wasting this fabric, completely wasting fabric, not to mention time and energy and patterns, because I never really revisited patterns, not understanding or learning what I was doing. So for this point, I just want to home in on the idea that just because you've made some mistakes doesn't mean you should give up on your project. Giving up on your project is going to take you backwards, not forwards. Because when we finish a project, we learn from it and we feel confident. So the next thing to do that will take your sewing from really bad to really good is to choose patterns that work for you now. I think when we have a look at patterns and we see them on the models, we see them looking perfect, especially if you're larger like me. You might look at a slim model and think, oh, that garment looks absolutely perfect. That is right up my street. That is my style down to a T. I want to make that. And you purchase it that dopamine hits and you purchase it there and then, but actually you never end up making it, and if you do, it doesn't suit you. So you've got to stop buying patterns that don't suit you for now. You're purchasing them for a perfect you, a future you that doesn't exist and may never exist. So all that's going to happen there is when you go through the process of sewing it, you're going to get really disheartened. For example, when I've bought patterns like this and I've made them up, I've been cutting the fabric out and thinking, this pattern piece is really, really wide, because it has to be for me, you see. It doesn't look that wide on the model, and that's sort of putting negative thoughts in my mind. And then as I go through the process, more and more negative thoughts go through my mind, and by the time I finish the thing and I'm wearing it, I'm telling myself really bad stuff about how it doesn't suit me, how I look frumpy, how it's not for me. I'll take a photo of it, show someone, and then it get put in the cupboard and never ever worn again. I had so many garments like that I did a brutal declutter of my wardrobe a few years ago, and I just pretty much chucked everything out because I was so sick of it. I was sick of making garments that I was making for a future me, but in today's body, and it just did not match up. There was a real mismatch there. Certainly in my own experience, what happened was that I would come to sewing emotionally charged, negatively charged, and not enjoy the process. If you want to absorb everything you need to learn, you want to absorb everything because you enjoy it so much, you want to get better at stuff, then you need to come to it with a really positive mindset. Part of that is, as I said in my last video, coming at it when you're well rested, when you're hydrated, when you're well fed, when you're in a good mood. But the other part of it is not putting ourselves through shit that's going to make us feel bad. So the next thing that is going to help you become better at sewing is understanding that there's lots of different ways to do the same thing in sewing. I think traditionally when we look to learn sewing back in the day, we would learn from instructors who were taught themselves the proper way. And so those skills, that way of doing something, was passed down the generations. But these days, life is very different. Anyone can get on YouTube and be a tutor, a creator, someone who partakes in sharing information, just as I have. And all those people have their own way of doing stuff. And often there's no right or wrong way. If you need to go to the high street, there's 3 different routes you can take. You're still going to get to the high street in the end. And actually, I find sometimes when people have found like hacks or shortcuts to doing something, it can be quicker and it can be easier and have the exact same result. Occasionally there are times where you don't want to cut corners and you do want to do it the way the professionals do it. Certainly if you want to get a professional finish. I get a lot of comments where I show a certain way of doing a technique, and I will get comments saying, oh, you should be doing it this way, or you should be doing it that way. Well, my response to that is no, not necessarily. If I'm doing something a certain way and it has worked for me all this time, there's no real reason to do it someone else's way. But as I said at the start of the video, we've all got our own story, we've all got our own experiences, and we get from A to B to C in our own way. So I'd say in terms of speeding up your sewing process, if you are following a certain way of doing something and it's not working for you, it's not clicking into place, you're not really understanding how to do it, find a different way, because there's lots of different ways. Nothing will slow your sewing down more than doing something a certain way, the proper way, if it's not working for you. Hopefully this sideward glance at sewing has really helped you, but if you need more tips, check out this video